This is Capturing Light, episode number 144 with Marcus Guider.
Welcome to Capturing Light, a director of photographers podcast, spotlighting cinematography tips, tools, and techniques, inspiring and educating filmmakers like you so you can illuminate your vision. And now, your host, Les Gaddis.
Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I am your host, Les Gaddis, and today we are talking to another amazing cinematographer. His name is Marcus Guider. He has a ton of fantastic work, and I really enjoyed the conversation with him. He talked a lot, just about not only the project that we discussed, but he gave some really, really valuable advice that I think for anyone that's just starting out, they definitely need to listen to this. So, let's just get into it. Here is that interview with Marcus Guider. All right, so I want to thank Marcus Guider for coming on the Capture Line podcast. How you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. I definitely appreciate you reaching out and having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to chatting with you and just talking all things cinematography.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's start. Like, how did you get into the film industry? Kind of how did you start?
I think for me, it started less about the industry and the thought of the industry and more about just my experiences growing up. So I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I was originally born in Baltimore, but I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and I have essentially growing up, my dad always had cameras around. So it was something that he was interested in. It was something to where, even to date, I have some VHSs that he recorded on like an old Panasonic camera, and it's just like fly on the wall family video stuff. Nothing to where it's like in your face or anything like that, but I think seeing that growing up, especially when I was a lot younger, really just something stuck with me. It just kind of made me feel the power of not only imagery but capturing a moment. Like for me, it's like these moments in life are fleeting, and at some point, this image, being able to see whether it's this family member, this environment, whatever it is, life changes so much. So being able to see those moments again are way more impactful um, than the inconvenience of capturing them. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I think that's where my interest in cameras came from. He always had a camera with him, recording whether it was at home or if we went to go visit family. And like I said, I got some of those VHSs now, 25 years later. I can turn them on and see my younger self. I can see my younger brother. I can see my older sister, see my family. And for me, I think that's where it started.
Nice. Do you still have a VHS player?
You know what? My mom had contacted a while ago saying that she had held on to some VHS tapes and she
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to have them. And at the time, I didn't have a VHS player, so I definitely had to hunt one down. I seen that they had appreciated in value if you buy them online because they're
Really?
so, they were hard to get a hold of.
Right.
But I found one locally and I popped the tape in. And once I started seeing some of those family moments and everything, I was like, all right, I gotta convert this to digital and keep these going.
Right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I still have a and it's funny, I have a VHS player like literally attached to my living room TV. Like it's the
Yep. Yeah.
weirdest. Like I haven't watched a tape in like years, but for some
Uh,
reason just the thought of having it there and it being, like attached to like I could, jump into the AV setting and watch it. That's interesting. Cool. So, did you go to school? Did you learn online? Like, how did you uh go from like watching your dad and being inspired by him and the capturing the moments to now, like when someone looks at your photography now, they're like, oh wow, like where did you learn all the technical aspects of cinematography?
Yeah, it was a journey. Like I used to play around with cameras and they kind of rendered in the background when I was younger. So for me, like it was never the focus. It was just something that even I wasn't aware of that I was as interested. I think my parents realized it, so they would make them, some things hey, keep your hands off, don't mess with that. They were very encouraging to me messing with the cameras, playing with them, trying just making home videos and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think my real interest came out of necessity. So I used to, growing up, listening to music and everything like that, I was into music. So a lot of my friends, we did music and everything. And through that kind of underground feel of music, you start learning things out of necessity. You need things for marketing, you need photos, you need album covers, you need all of that. And while I would definitely say that music was definitely not the path or the trajectory for me, what I will say is that through going through that growing up, I started to find my true love and my true passion, which was, being behind the scenes, not being in front of the camera, but behind it and orchestrating and, arranging things um, in a way that I felt like was aesthetically pleasing. So going from there, that kind of took me into early high school for the most part. And like when I went to college, I went to KU, the University of Kansas, and I was there and I was going through the film school and everything. And I'll be completely honest with you, the gen eds was for the birds for me. Like,
Hmm.
taking a couple years to do that. I'm a person that likes to be hands on and learn quickly, basically. So for
Right.
me, it was like going through the film study, the theory, all of those things. I wanted to learn the stuff in practicality. I wanted to actually get my hands on things, and that was a couple years away. So what I found was I found myself and my best friend Chris Bradley. We we would essentially, I don't want to say skip class, but from time to time, it was, most of the time when you're thinking about skipping class, it's more like, oh man, you're trying to get away from education or the focus or whatever it is. Actually, we would miss a class because we're actually studying cameras, we're actually studying imagery. So,
Hmm.
what I found out was essentially we were creating our own curriculum. So, because we wanted to learn at a different pace. And from there, eventually I left the school. I think he did as well. And that turned into me continuing. It's a day to day thing for me, even today. Like, I never stop studying, I never stop learning. It's a part of literally waking up. You could go through the browsers on my phone, everything is film related, camera related, whatever it may be. But, ultimately, I got to a point after leaving the school that I felt like I had exhausted my resources.
Hmm.
Like I felt like I had taught myself all that I could teach myself, and I realized there was still a gap.
Right.
And my goal became to bridge the gap. Like I needed to figure out, okay, I'm at this point. How do I get to wherever I want to be?
Hmm.
And I wasn't necessarily comparing myself to local filmmakers because honestly, I didn't know any at the time. I wasn't comparing myself to the local film market. I was looking at the imagery of a Roger Deakins. I was looking at, the imagery of some of the higher end cinematographers, the people that are the pinnacle of the industry per se. And I was like, man, how do I get from where I'm at to where they're at?
Hmm.
And that was a new love for me. And it was a love in a sense of I knew at that point, I didn't even really technically know the term of cinematographer or cinematography because I hadn't been on a formal set or anything like that. But what I did realize was that there was this gap of learning and education, and that I knew that I would never fully know everything.
Hmm.
Just understanding that I would never completely learn everything, every aspect, every nuance about this actually intrigued me more because it was something that would hold my interest. So eventually I went to the office hours of a filmmaker and professor at the school. His name is Kevin Wilmot. And at this point, in today's time, Kevin Wilmot is an Academy Award winner. He collaborates a lot with Spike Lee as well as doing his own directorial. stuff. But I went to him and essentially I said, "Hey, look, I'm not at the school anymore." I introduced myself and I said, "I feel like I've exhausted my resources on teaching myself this, but I know this is what I want to do. Is there any advice you can give me?"
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, he wrote down a phone number and he said, "I want you to call them and tell them I sent you." And the phone number was for a local company, a local production company that was producing his independent films.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I connected with a guy named J.S. Hampton and a guy named Jeremy Osborne. Jeremy Osborne was the DP at the company and the co-owner of the company, and Jay was working at the company as a producer. And essentially, that changed everything.
So once you connected with them, like that's when like the real leap in education and experience kind of changed for you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Once I connected with them by way of Kevin, everything changed. I came on to my first set with them. They were shooting an independent short film at the time. And I came on as a PA. I didn't know the positions or anything like that, but I told them what I was interested in. And essentially, they just through that project, they see my work ethic and they see my determination. And Jeremy, the DP of the company, said, "Hey, look, I see something in you, and I can teach you in 3 months what you would learn in 4 years of film school. Are you interested?" And I told him, "Of course." So from there, that started our relationship. I ended up ultimately coming on as an intern at the company. And then from there, that moved into a full time position. And ultimately, I grew into being a DP through by way of that company.
That's awesome. So how long do you think it took you from, I guess, entering that particular company and kind of where you were then to like, I guess, working on projects that you were DPing and you were like, okay, I feel like I'm getting some of the images that I'm happy with and that I'm feeling like I can do this. Was there a specific
Absolutely.
time?
There's um how can I put this? Because I don't want it to sound vain or pretentious or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
I can honestly say it did not take long. And the reason why is because Jeremy was shooting so often, and whatever he was shooting, I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing everything that I needed to do to be on that set and to do a job, but I was also picking up on workflow. I was picking up on these things. And that's why he had me in proximity so I could pick up on things. It wasn't going to be, "Hey, I'm going to verbally teach you this or teach you that." It was like, "Hey, I'm going to put you in this environment and you seem to pick up on stuff. Take whatever you can take from it." And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, when we're back at the company, every once in a while, it will be, "Hey, you should know this," and it may be, "I need to know this for this particular job that I'm acing, or this particular, whatever it may be." But ultimately, as far as like developing my own visual sensibility, that company, they had a they were a production company and they also had a rental house. So
Mm-hmm.
in that rental house, you had anything from a 200-watt, tungsten mini, Mole Richardson mini, up to an 18K. And in the camera area, you had, Red One. You had at the time you had Red One. You had like a Red Epic. You had Zeiss Super Speeds, Loma Anamorphic. You had all of these things, and essentially, I just slowly started to learn about all of that stuff. So when I would get off work, I had 24-hour access to the building. When I would technically be off work, I would stay and I would
Mm-hmm.
just work in a warehouse. I would pull out a lens, I would pull out the camera, and I would just, point a light and start figuring stuff out. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
really take long because I could show some of my imagery from when I first started. That wasn't saying that I was consistent, but what I did realize very on is that it was something there. Like I was on to something. I had
Mm-hmm.
to then bridge that gap on, okay, can you do this consistently? Can you consistently make a good image? Can you consistently convey emotion through lighting? And that's for me, that's a lifetime journey.
Right, for sure. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the Azuri closet commercial. How did that project come about, and like how did you get started with it?
So even currently, I still collaborate with Jay Hampton. He was a producer at the company that we were both working at back then, but
Mm-hmm.
now he does his own directorial work as well. So him and I collaborate constantly on different projects, whether it's independent shorts, whether it's independent features, or agency-based commercials.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of collaboration. Him and I wanted to find essentially infuse some of our know-how back into the community, take some of our
Right.
resources and bring that back into the community. And essentially what we decided to do was look for and this is out of Kansas City. We wanted to look for like a black owned company
Mm-hmm.
and a small black owned company that could use some marketing assets. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily had to be on the same level as financially as like some of the agency based commercials and stuff we were doing. But we wanted to essentially create something that could infuse some marketing assets into them, into that company, and just help elevate them basically. Because these are resources that we already had access to. We had relationships in the community. And we were like, how can we kind of cultivate this and reinvest in our community?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, so then when you approached them, um, did you along with you said it was a producing partner, right?
So yeah, he's the he directed the project. He started off when I first met him, he was a producer. At
Got it.
this point, he's a full blown director and does some producing as well.
Okay, so you approached this business with the idea of just helping them with marketing. Did you have any concepts, like any ideas of what you kind of wanted to do? I just know that like it sounds like you just really wanted to help the community, which is awesome for sure. Like a business that might be doing some some big things and just need the marketing help, So I guess from like a ground level start of like from the creative aspect of it, how did that all jump off?
Yeah, we so when we approached Yuzuri Closet, we reached out and said in general what we would like to do, but it was pretty vague. It wasn't necessarily saying, "Hey, we want this specific look or this specific style," because whoever we collaborated with, we wanted to make sure that it was authentic and true to what their needs were, to the culture of their business and the atmosphere that they've created in their branding. So essentially, we hopped on a call with her once we found out she was interested. We hopped on a call and we just had a discussion on her and her company and what is the call to action for her company if there's a call to action. What is
Mhm.
what's your branding? Who's your target audience? Different things like that, but also just getting down to the culture. What's the culture of your company and why does it exist? And from there, that's when, based on the things that we were hearing, which they have an amazing call to action, that's what really drove the aesthetic for the project.
Okay. Awesome. And I'm on your website right now and I'm looking at some of the frames, which I mean they're beautiful for sure. Could you talk a little bit about the technical aspects of it for the camera nerds that might want to know like what camera you use, what lenses, like kind of how you know, cooked it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually I do get a lot of whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, people will contact and ask about like the technicality. I will say, and everybody close to me knows that like I know technicality, but I don't lead by it. I definitely lean into I create from the inside out, and that's definitely something I recommend to a lot of people. This project, and that's not to negate talking about it because we can definitely go into that. So for me, this project, what we shot with, we had um, a Red Dragon camera package. We had contact Zeiss lenses, so some of the still cinematic lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was essentially what we utilized on that. The lighting and grip package. If essentially we shot primarily LEDs. We had airy sky panels. We had aperture units. So like the Aperture 600C. We had some 300D Mark IIs. We had some Quasar like X fade or crossfade bicolor LED
Mm-hmm.
tubes, and essentially we had a grip truck package, and labor of love for the community.
Right, for sure. What was the crew size? Was it a fairly small crew?
Yeah, it was fairly small. G&E was, I think it might have been 2 and 2, if I remember correctly. I think G&E might have been 2 and 2. Camera department, I had myself, had my first AC, and he had a second AC there. And then from there, we had a few PAs, the director, AD, and I think that was pretty much it.
Okay, cool. And you're opping, correct? As far as
Yes.
okay,
Yep.
got it. Cool. So from like a feeling standpoint, like how do you go about refining your aesthetic when like you look at like your images for a Zuri closet and I'm like, okay, this definitely sets a mood, it sets a tone. There's rich colors, like for someone that's just starting out and they're wondering how they can get better and
Hmm.
better results, and you're like, oh well, come from the inside, and find
Hmm.
it, like where are you getting your source of inspiration? How are you like feeding yourself to become a better artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say take in as much imagery as possible, first and foremost, whether that's watching films, whether it's looking at paintings, whether it's looking at, just still frames, whatever it is. I would say you should always be cultivating a library of inspiration. And that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you literally have to have references for every project or whatever it may be. I know some people do that. But what I will say is you should always just have ideas. And for me, a lot of my lighting and a lot of the tonality, like what you see in Usuri, it literally goes off feeling, right? A part of
Mm-hmm.
it is practicality, finding locations and what does that location give you? What does it inspire in you? And what do you want to carry and what do you want to change? But for the most part, a lot of it is, you know, really, it's hard to say because it does really come from the inside. I look at the talent, I look at their faces, I look at their facial structure. What do I want to emphasize? What do I want to de-emphasize? What emotion do I want from this particular talent? And that's where I go about that. So where you see like the bold, colorful frames, with the lady walking down kind of like the stairwell, in Missouri, where she has like a rich, like orangish red color and everything like that. For me, that came from the fact that I wanted her entrance to stand out among the entire piece. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted you to feel that interest. So her entrance. So from a technical standpoint, pushing there's to her, I would say frame left to her actual right, there's some trans windows basically, to where and that's just the aesthetic for the layout of the location. And I was like, man, it would be beautiful to push, some lighting through that, to carry that, to allow that to become a part of the character of the frame and to frame around that. And so we played with some different colors, seeing what we wanted to utilize. There's stained glass windows behind her that I really definitely wanted to play into the imagery. So we made sure that we blocked accordingly. Really looking for ways that add production value, but also things that evoke emotion. And that's very subjective. And that's why I say it comes from the inside, because, what's emotive to me may be based on my perspective, that may be based on what I've seen growing up, things that I'm emotionally connected to. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, stained glass windows may, it may be church, it may be cathedral, it may be a lot of different things for different people. But for me, what I always look for is how do I create from a standpoint of empathy?
Right.
Whether that's a story, whether that's a commercial, where do I find myself in this story?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I start from. That's why I say to create, because sometimes I'm shooting things where the ideology doesn't necessarily align with mine. How do you create something that's visually, in tune? Are we just doing things to where it's, hey, we're going to key from this side, we're going to do this, we're going to do that? Or does that actually add up to emotion? Does it
Right.
actually tell the story? So that's why I say it comes from the inside. And a lot of that just has to do with empathy to start and to see what connects with me emotionally. And then from there, reverse engineering how that translates into an image.
One thing that I like about um, your work, and specifically in this Uziri Closet commercial, is just how you light black skin, and like it's. I feel like there's just artistry that's put in these images because you're not just blasting a whole bunch of light, at skin because you think because there's darker tones that you need to expose for it. Um, like are there any like where do you get, I guess, inspiration? Like who inspires you cinematography wise? Because I mean, I look at this and I see a lot of different artists, whether it's painters, whether it's cinematographers, and I'm just wondering kind of like how do you grow as a cinematographer, and who are you looking at, whether it's painting, whether it's cinematography, whether it's music, like where do you get inspiration from?
Um, for me, there's definitely some modern day cinematographers that stand out. I can honestly say that my work isn't there to emulate because for me, I think our perspectives are all different. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's for every creative. Like you need to dig in and find out what's your perspective, and bring that to the table. So for me, some of the standout cinematographers that I love seeing their work is a person like Bradford Young.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love seeing, Tommy Maddox as well. Like those are some of the people, and they would say, there's people from before that they enjoy as deep back to like a Gordon Willis or some of the, premier black cinematographers that have worked with, Spike Lee throughout the past. There's a lineage to it, but for me, the aesthetics that I create um is I almost want to say like is I'll just say I feel like it is truly it's just me. It's my perspective. It's not like while I definitely honor and I love all of their work, what I bring to the table is just digging within me
Mm-hmm.
and and just creating from there.
Right. If there's someone that's just starting school and they look at your
Mhm.
work and like they're like, "Hey, I want to be a cinematographer." What advice would you give them, starting out?
Um, I know the common advice would be shoot everything.
Mm-hmm.
So people hear that advice. That's definitely a way to go about it. I think, a large part of it is, yeah, you do take the time, you learn the technical, and people will say you'll learn that over time, but, really, honor and study the tools and honor the position that you're saying that you want. So, it's very easy to label yourself a DP, a cinematographer, any position for that matter, but you definitely, I think, should research and honor that, whatever that position is that you desire and do everything that you can to uphold that title.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't necessarily say how you should go about your imagery. All that says is that there is a way of, taking the time to understand the cameras, understand the sensors, understand the technology to whatever extent and capacity you can understand it, because there's people that understand it to a science, and there's people that you know hey, give me a lens, give me the camera, and give me the space and the emotion, and I can navigate. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's people in between there. So I wouldn't say that it's a competition in any of those facets. What I would say is just take time to work to your capacity and know that you've done what you can do to understand it and honor it in that way. As far as the aesthetics, I keep saying it's within. So what I found out when I first started shooting was, okay, you can do certain things, and people will try to give you game plans and plays and different things that you can to get a pretty image, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you rinse and repeat that, you could easily de-emphasize the value of that image, or you can make your imagery feel sterile.
Right.
If everybody's using the exact same game plan, I find that a little weird because not everybody has the same aesthetics or perspective. I'm more interested in perspective. If I look at your work, I want to see something about you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see your perspective. So for people starting out, I would definitely say, while we're always looking outward, definitely look inward.
Right.
Learn the technology, but also learn about yourself. And the more
That's
you do that, I think you'll find that balance between finding things that evoke emotion, if that's what you want, or finding things, you'll find your lane. But I think there's this constant, you know, practicality and consciousness of filmmaking, and then there's like this subconscious level of just emotion. What do I feel? And I think as artists, this is what we all, battle,
mm-hmm.
is how do we actually connect the two? And for me, I just try to, there's times, like, in total honesty, if I go gaps within shooting and stuff like that, there's times where it's like, I know every day I'm doing the tangible work. I'm studying, I'm researching, I'm doing all of these things, but I know at the end of the day, all of that goes out the window when I'm filming.
Mm-hmm.
And I light and I lead by emotion. So there's times when you go long gaps between that, you may feel like, man, am I really doing this? Can I do this?
Right.
And then you step on set and it feels like home. So that's why I say it's important to learn the technology, learn what you like, build that library, study those images, but also value yourself as much as you value the external work and some of those physical items that you're working with. Because it's
Right.
not always going to be about the best camera. It's not about the best lenses. It's not about the name brand lighting. It's not, like, all of those things move the needle, but without a perspective, it changes nothing.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. And then also too, you just think about, moving the needle. Like it depends on, like what skill you're you're actually judging that needle. Like, is it
Yeah, absolutely.
so no, that's fantastic advice, Marcus. No, I appreciate it. How can people keep in touch with you? How can they follow you, see your work? Like give us like your website, your social.
Yeah, absolutely. People can check out my website, see some of my work. It's marcusguider.com. And people can check me out on Instagram as well on Facebook. Basically, Marcus Guider underscore DP.
Got it. Cool. Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes for people to check out. Marcus, I appreciate you just taking some time and talking about your imagery. There's a ton of just nuggets and wisdom in this podcast that you're just dropping left and right. So this was a fun one.
Now, I definitely appreciate it. And thanks for reaching out, Les.
So again, I want to thank Marcus for coming on. Be sure to follow him. Go to his website. Look at some of his work. Use it as a reference because it's definitely good stuff. Follow him on Instagram, and yeah, just keep up with what he's doing because he's putting out some really really great content. If you have any questions for me, you can always reach out to me via email, les@gaddisvisuals.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at lesgaddis. If you have any questions, just send me a message, and I'll try to answer it. If I don't know the answer to your question, then chances are I am plugged in with someone that might have an answer for you. So with all that, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you for always coming through, always listening to the podcast. And if this happens to be your first podcast, then it was definitely a good one. Thanks so much for being here. And yeah, I appreciate y'all. Have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Capturing Light.
Thanks for listening to Capturing Light with Les Gaddis, a Director of Photographers podcast. Inspiring and educating filmmakers like you so you can illuminate your vision. A Gaddis Visuals production.